John chapter 11, verse number 17 through verse 26. It will be on the screen for you as well. It says, when Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. And when Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. But even I know that God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. And Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes of me will never, ever die. Do you believe this, Martha? I don't know if you have a context for this. I think most of us have been in this scenario. Picture yourself sitting inside a waiting room of some sort. Maybe it's a waiting room in a consultation area on the side of an emergency department or a surgery waiting area. Maybe it's in the doctor's office after having had test runs. But it's this waiting area where you're sitting. Maybe you're sitting there with a couple of close family members. It's a very intimate moment. Not everybody's around, but there are a couple people around, and you're sitting there waiting. You're waiting for someone to come in the room and do something, say something, and there's this palpable tension as you begin to wonder what is going to happen next. When the doctor walks in the room, what will be the words that come out of his or her mouth? What are they going to say? What is going to be the diagnosis? What is going to be the prognosis? And as you sit waiting in that moment, it's amazing how loud silence becomes. You're sitting there waiting for an answer, and the silence begins to become the loudest noise you've ever heard, and your mind begins to race. And I don't know how your mind works, but my mind rarely arrives at the best case scenario. In fact, when my mind begins to work, it begins to work its way very quickly to the darkest possible reality. You're sitting there in that tension, in that anxiety, and all you really want is for somebody to open that door, walk in, and sit down and say, it's going to be all right. Oh, can you feel that hope? Can you feel that part of you that's saying, if I could just hear somebody in authority, someone with some knowledge who would say to me, everything's going to be all right. That's the tension that Mary and Martha were sitting in. You got to understand, Mary and Martha were close friends of Jesus. Them and their brother Lazarus had been very involved in Jesus' ministry. They had become very close friends to him. And then Lazarus gets sick, but Mary and Martha initially don't have a major issue with it because, we know Jesus. Come on, somebody. When you got the Son of God on speed dial, not much makes you nervous. But they called out to Jesus and said, hey, Lazarus is sick. We need you to come. And they sat there waiting. Lazarus continued to get sick, but hey, Jesus is coming. Jesus will be here soon. They were waiting, and Lazarus got sicker and sicker until eventually Lazarus dies. And Jesus never showed up. I wonder if anybody in the room, if they were honest, could relate to the feeling they must have felt. The fear, the worry, the anxiety that then gave way to depression and frustration and despair. Because there was something in them that continued to hope in the midst of their hurt. Until now, it has gotten to the point that they assume there is no solution, there is no answer. It's gone too far now. But you see, what's interesting is how we can look at their faith journey through this story And I believe it's going to help you see where you are and where I believe Jesus would like to get you before we leave today. The first thing I want you to see about their faith is they had a faith that was comfortable. Remember, I said that they were close to Jesus. They were familiar with Jesus. They knew about Jesus and they knew Jesus. When I talk about comfortable faith, I think probably the best way to illustrate that is the close personal relationship that I have with a corporation called Planet Fitness. Every month, for the last 7 to 8 years, they have taken $24.99 out of my bank account faithfully on, I think it's the 15th or the 13th. I don't know. It's one of those days. I have access to go in there and use any of the exercise machines. I can go in the back, get in the tanning beds. I can get on the water beds. I can sit in the massage chairs. And I don't mean to brag, but I don't even have to wait. I don't have to do that just in Danville. I can literally do that anywhere on earth that there's a Planet Fitness. I just pop out my phone. It gives me a little barcode, and I can scan it, and I have access to the whole place. Now, ask me another question that may be relevant. Ask me how many times in the last 6 months I have utilized that access. I've got it, and there's some part of you that feels good because you have it. We're in an American culture where it's not about going to the gym, it's about belonging to the gym. Because the thing about a place like Planet Fitness, my son, Jennison, if you've seen him, you know he walks around. They don't make their money on him. Because for his 24 whatever dollars a month, he gets his money's worth. Like he uses their air conditioning. He uses their lights. He uses the electricity on their machines. He gets his money's worth. They're not making a penny on my son. But they've literally made hundreds of dollars off of me. Because they have had a consistent income without any obligation. And there are thousands upon thousands of other Americans just like me. That's where they make their living. And you know, that's sad. That's a good business model for Planet Fitness. But the sad thing is it's become the reality model for Christianity. There's a lot of people who say, I know Jesus. They even say, I believe in Jesus, but we put Jesus in a convenient, comfortable box. And what we see right away with Mary, when Jesus shows up, Lazarus is dead. He's been dead 4 days now. Jesus, you got to get a hold of just to get some tension of the text. You got to be frustrated at Jesus that he didn't come while he was dying. But what kind of friend is Jesus that he didn't even make it to the funeral? I mean, Mary and Martha, sometimes people get in this text and they're like, well, if it had been me, I'd have known Jesus and I'd have trusted Jesus. No, you wouldn't. You would have been ticked off. You would have been telling Jesus what for, just like they were. But she says a very telling statement here at the very beginning. She says, Lord, if you would have been here. As in, I know you're able to do stuff, but in my mind, your ability to do it is confined to your presence in my situation. You have to be here for it to work. And since you weren't here, it's not going to work. And what we like is a faith that's comfortable. We like a faith that works how we understand it. I pray, something happens immediately. That's a faith that is comfortable. People act like they have a lot of faith because God answers their prayer when they pray. I'm going to tell you something. When you know you have a lot of faith is when you don't get the answer, but you don't quit. That's a faith that goes beyond comfort, because comfortable faith is, I called Jesus, he showed up, Lazarus is no longer sick. That's a comfortable faith. And boy, do I wish I could live there. I would love it if God would just become my genie in a bottle. If he would allow me to just say, I want this, I want that, and poof, there it would be. But there's a problem with that. If he would do that, then he would cease to be God and I would be. And regardless of how much you may think you would do a better job, you don't have a clue how to be God. And you got to come to a place where you're comfortable living in the tension of him not doing what you thought he would, how you thought he would. Because if you can't get comfortable with that tension, you're not going to last long following Jesus. We want a faith that is comfortable, but when we try to live with a comfortable faith, we go to what happens for them. They had a relationship, but they had not gotten to a place of full, complete trust yet. And so a comfortable faith will inevitably lead us to a faith that gets frustrated. Have you ever had an appointment with someone, and get me, it's bad when it's a business appointment, when it's some kind of a business transaction, that's frustrating. But it's on another level when it's a friend or a family member. We're meeting at a coffee shop, we're meeting at a restaurant, we're meeting outside the movies, and we're going to go in and get a movie together. And they text you, I'm on the way. 30 minutes later, they're still not there. If you're close enough to have Life 360 with them, you look on Life 360, and they still haven't even left their house. You're constantly thinking, where are they? Why haven't they at least texted to say why they're late? What is the deal? You see, because the longer they delay, the more it feels like they don't care about you or your time or your situation. The longer you're waiting, the more you're thinking, this is disrespectful. I'd take this from somebody I'd never met before. I would be frustrated, but I'd just get up and walk out, and just that would be the end of our experience. But that's not what this is. This is a relationship that I thought was going to go the distance, but I don't know if it's going to make it past this infraction. Because I'm frustrated. Why aren't you at least telling me why you're late? You just expect me to sit here and wait and assume that you're actually going to. That's what Jesus did to them. They said, Jesus, Lazarus is sick. I'm sure you're going to come help us. And then he didn't show up. And his disciples said, aren't we going to go? And he said, we'll get there. He explained it to his disciples. Listen to me. He explained it to his disciples, but he never sent word to the family. He said to his disciples, of course, you gotta, if you read the Gospels, you should really do it sometime. It's great, because it'll make you feel better about yourself. Because Jesus surrounded himself with a bunch of guys who were a real motley crew. I mean, and they did some stupid stuff. And like Jesus explained, this sickness is not unto death, but it's to the glory of God. And his disciples were like, okay. He explained it. They didn't even understand it. But at least they got an explanation. Mary and Martha get nothing. And it is in that silence, it is in that stress that they begin to get to a place where they are frustrated. And so they say, Jesus, we sent word. Jesus, you knew, but Jesus, where were you? I don't know if there's anybody else in the room that can relate with that. You can say, God, I asked, but I never saw you do it. God, I trusted you, but I didn't see you do it. I had a moment of intense clarity earlier this year, or I guess it would be last year now. Life's going so fast, I can't remember what the calendar year it is. But my daughter, Season, who is going to be 2 tomorrow, had to go through an MRI because she's having some development delays. If you're around here, you know that my Season scoots on her rear end, but she doesn't walk yet. We're trying very hard to understand why that is, other than she's really stubborn and spoiled. I think that about sums it up. But part of that process was for her to get an MRI. And we had to go to Peoria to the Children's Hospital. They were going to sedate her to do this MRI. The way they were going to do that is via intravenous medication. And so they gave her this stuff to make her loopy while they put the IV in. It was so funny because when that stuff hit, she was screaming and hollering because she hates the doctors, scared to death. She gets it natural. I'm just like her. And she's screaming and hollering. They put that stuff up her nose. And then all of a sudden we knew it hit when she just went, and then they're putting that IV in. She's like, I'm like, do you guys sell this stuff? Because like, I don't make a lot of money, but I'm pretty sure I would bankrupt myself on some of that right there. But we get down to the MRI room, and they take her to go. We can't go with her, but we get in a little room where we can hear her, and my wife was able to go. I couldn't go. My wife could go at least till she went to sleep. They get her in there. They go to push the IV, and she doesn't go to sleep. As they go to do it again, what had happened was her IV went bad. And so they're in that hallway. They decide they're going to try to put her IV in without the happy meds. She was screaming in pain and scared. I mean, you put yourself as a 2-year-old in her. She didn't know what was going on. And I remember I was in that moment in that little room, and I was just walking back and forth praying. For some context, if you don't know my life story, my mother was killed by a drunk driver over the summer of 24. And this happened last fall. And as I'm in there praying, I said, God, where are you? Please show up, help my baby. And then I heard myself say something I didn't even know I still felt. I said, you weren't there with my mom. Would you please be here now? And I realized I'm walking with a faith that's been frustrated. Because I thought he would have been here by now. I thought he would have handled this differently than he did. But I need you to understand something today. God's delay does not equal his disinterest. Because he hasn't showed up yet doesn't mean he isn't interested, doesn't mean he doesn't care, and doesn't mean he isn't working. It just means something greater is at work than you understand yet. You see, because sometimes when God doesn't show up when we want him, it's because he's about to do something greater than what we ask him for. It would have been amazing to heal Lazarus. But Lazarus is about to become front page news about a resurrection. And they don't know that yet. They don't understand that yet. All they're doing is living in the tension of where are you now? And I think there's people in this room that can feel that. So let's get to that third level together. It is a faith that is transformed. You know, we live our entire lives now on this thing. This is it. And it's bad for me and my generation, but it's a whole nother level for my kids. Like, want to see somebody freak out? You get around someone under 20, I'd say under 25. Someone under 25, that's phone has died and they can't find a charger. you would think the nuclear holocaust has come. But what if somebody needs to get a hold of me? They have no context for a world in which if you weren't sitting by your landline phone, you were unreachable. In a world where I grew up, where when I left the house in the morning, my mom wasn't going to have any contact with me until I came home that evening. And should she have chosen to try to contact me in between the time, she would have to do major detective work to try to figure out where it was I was going to be so she could try to call where that was. But we live in a whole new world. Boy, we need our phone. But I'm going to tell you something. When this thing dies, it has all the capacity in the world. But you can tap it. You can push the buttons. You can wave it around. You can even get it in a hot zone with Wi-Fi. But when it's dead, it ain't going to do nothing. And the only way it's going to do anything is if you find a way to plug it into a power source. Because when you connect it with a power source, what was dead comes back to life. And I want you to see what Jesus is trying to teach us in this text. He says to Martha, he says, he's going to live again. And she says, oh, Lord, yes. She gives the religious cliche answer. I know he will rise when we all rise on that last day. And Jesus says, Martha, I am resurrection. I am life. What he was saying is, I'm not just giving life. I am the source that gives life. You see, because resurrection is not something Jesus does. It's who he is. He is life. But you got to hear this. Lazarus, why 4 days? Well, because you've heard the stories, and I'm sure in that time frame, it was even worse. But you've heard the stories of people who got all the way to the funeral home, and somehow, just before they were about to get drained of their blood and embalmed, gasp for breath and freak out that funeral director. They weren't really dead. They were just really, really close. We've heard those stories. So maybe that's what Lazarus was. Maybe that's what they could have said Lazarus was after the first day. Maybe even after the second. Maybe. Why did Jesus wait the fourth day? Because I want you to understand something. Lazarus wasn't really sick. He wasn't really close to dead. He was dead. Like, I'm not talking about he had been lifeless for a minute. I'm talking about that we will see later in the text that they insinuate he has already begun to decompose. He's dead. But what Jesus didn't do was improve his condition. He didn't make him less dead. He didn't make him slightly less dead. He took him from a state of being completely dead to completely alive. Because something you're going to learn is when Jesus shows up, dead things can't stay dead. Jesus walks to the tomb. I think this is one of the most powerful things later in John 11. I encourage you, read it on your own time, the entirety of this story. One of the most powerful verses in Scripture, probably the most memorized verse in Scripture, John 11:35, is where Jesus comes to the tomb and he sits in their grief for a moment. The Bible says Jesus wept. There's a lot of people, theologians, who pontificate and theorize as to why on earth Jesus wept when Jesus knew what he was there to do. I'll tell you where I land. in all of my grand wisdom. I think he wept because he needed them to see a physical representation of the fact that just because I didn't get here yet doesn't mean this hasn't torn me up. He wasn't weeping because Lazarus was dead. He was weeping because he was broken for what they had to go through to get to that moment. And notice, I don't think he was weeping for Lazarus. He was weeping for Mary and Martha. He's like, I'm so sorry. If it wouldn't have been so much for your good, I would have come sooner. But I knew what I was doing. And so I let you hurt without explanation. I let you go through pain without understanding the purpose, because I knew, but I need you to see right now that it wasn't because I didn't care. It's because I knew. It's because I knew what I'm about to do. In that moment, he steps into the grief, and then he says something crazy. He says, roll the stone away. That stone is the representation of finality. It was the exclamation point on the concept that this situation is over. It is finished. It says literally, nothing else can be done. And I want you to notice that when Jesus said, roll away the stone, he was immediately met with conflict from the sisters. And they said, oh Lord, don't do that, because surely by now he's already stinking. Because what I found is what we see as a stone of finality can quickly become a stone of cover-up, because what's happened is we haven't processed what's gone wrong. We're just trying to act like it's not bothering us anymore. If you roll away that stone, I'm going to smell the stench of what you didn't do. Jesus, you need to understand, this is an issue you don't want to talk about around me. Because you don't understand. I put a stone in front of it, and I've talked to you cordially because you are Jesus. But don't you dare remind me how much you've betrayed me. Don't you dare remind me how much you've hurt me. Jesus says, you got to roll it away. Because you got to understand something. You're not going to go forward with Jesus as long as you don't deal with your frustrations in the past with Jesus. Jesus is not like your family. You got a lot of family members who think you do wrong to each other. And then the way you move forward is try to pretend like it didn't happen when you're together. But everybody knows. Everybody's sitting at Thanksgiving. Oh, I'd like to hit you in the face. Oh, pass the pumpkin pie, and I hope you die. She's just trying to cover it up. Jesus said, that's not how we're going to relate. Roll away the stone. He's saying that to some people in this room because you walked in here just to do your Easter due diligence. It's been dead for a while. You've moved on, you said. It's final. It is what it is. I'm moving on. Forget it. But you're still angry. You're still hurting. And you're still broken. And I come to tell you that Jesus brought you in this room today because he doesn't want to just move on. He wants you to move it. Open the wound for a moment. See, we've walked in here with stones in our lives, situations we've buried, prayers we've stopped praying, hopes that we've given up on. Do you know what's interesting is Jesus speaks to this stone, but it won't be long until Jesus will be dealing with his own stone. It's just a few days later, they took Jesus and they falsely accused him, illegally tried him, mortally beat him, hung him on a cross on a Friday afternoon, and for 6 hours he bled every drop of blood in his body. And then they took that body and they put it in a tomb that he didn't even buy, he borrowed, because he knew he'd only need it for the weekend. Somebody said, wasn't that nice of Joseph of Arimathea to offer his tomb for him? No, Joseph was the only one who paid attention. He knew it wasn't permanent. But in order to make sure he stayed in the tomb, because he'd already been talking about getting back up, and so they said, let's put a stone in front of it. I come to talk to some people who you put a stone in front of it because you're trying to get past it. And I come to some other people who other people have put a stone in front of it trying to keep you in it. But whether you put the stone there or whether somebody else put the stone there is irrelevant, because I come to tell you this morning, we have a stone mover. We have a Jesus who still moves stones out of the way, who still removes the it's over, who still removes the it's too late. He still removes nothing can be done. He moves it out of the way. And when Jesus shows up, you see, on that third day, nothing could hold him down. He come up out of that grave, and because he got up, we can get up too. Jesus said, Lazarus, and I want to help you with that. He didn't say that for no reason. You know why he said Lazarus? Because when he speaks to death, every dead thing. So he needed to make sure it was Lazarus. Because if he'd have been irresponsible and said, come forth, every dead body within an earshot would have popped up out of their grave. In fact, some days later, when he came out of the grave, the Bible tells us that people came out of graves all over town. Because his ability to bring life is not selective. Anything he speaks to is coming to life. So he said, Lazarus, come forth. And I'd have loved to have been there. Because you have to understand, he spoke, Lazarus, come forth. But we'll see in the text that Lazarus comes out still bound in grave clothes, which means he was barely able to move. I don't know how Lazarus sat up. I mean, how many of you can sit up without the help of your limbs? I guess you're still younger than me. It takes my elbow and everything I got. Get up out of bed now. Grab that night table. It's not there for things, it's there for my safety. I don't know how he got up. And so it took him a minute. And I can just imagine the people going, what a fool. How dare he be 4 days late and then come put on this show? These poor people, all they've been through. And the very ones who talked like that had to eat every word they said, because all of a sudden, out of that grave comes Lazarus, alive, fully alive. And I want to tell somebody this morning, if you'd let him talk to your thing, whatever it is. Some of you, it's your entire life, because you're dead in trespasses and sins. You don't even know it, but you're a dead man walking. You don't make any decisions anymore. Your life is dictated by the drives on the inside of you. You want so bad to be free. You want so bad to do something different, but you can't, and you've tried. You've done everything you know how to do to try to fix yourself, and nothing has worked, and you have resolved yourself to this is the way it has to be. But I want to tell you this morning, if you'd be audacious enough to let Jesus speak into that thing you've given up on, your addiction issue, the pain from your past, your sin problem, whatever it may be, the frustration you have in your faith from a prayer that wasn't answered, whatever that is, whatever fill in the blank is for you today, if you'd let him, he'd bring it to life. It's because here's what I've learned. If Jesus is present, it's not over. If Jesus is present, death hasn't won. And if Jesus is present, your story's still being written. Stand with me all over the room.